In the meantime, the United States has accused China of manipulating global media through censorship, data harvesting, and covert purchases of foreign news outlets, and warns that the trend could lead to a sharp contraction of global freedom of expression. However, the U.S. State Department, in a report, says Beijing has spent billions of dollars annually on information manipulation efforts, including acquiring stakes in foreign media through public and non-public means, sponsoring online influencers, and securing distribution agreements that promote unlabeled Chinese government content.
First of its kind report on PRC information manipulation. It's a comprehensive look at how the PRC and the Communist Party of China attempt to distort the global information space to advance its geopolitical objectives. When you look at the pieces of the puzzle and you put it together, you see a breathtaking ambition on the part of the PRC to seek information dominance in key regions of the world. This report draws on publicly available sources as well as new information to expose the PRC's tactics, techniques, and processes to pursue that objective. It describes how China, the People's Republic of China, has invested billions of dollars to construct a global information ecosystem to promote propaganda, censorship, and disinformation. On issues the Chinese government deems sensitive, the PRC has employed online and offline intimidation.
And joining me to make sense of this conversation is Damola Adewale. He's a global affairs analyst. Thank you so much, Damola, for joining us on the news. You need to unmute your device. Yes, we can hear you. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, how would you assess the impact of the allegation leveled against China as regards manipulation efforts on global freedom of expression?
Yeah, so the US and China have always been at loggerheads regarding any form of activity and domination. And I can say that ever since the 1940s, after the Second World War and the Gulf War of the 1990s, China felt that the US was able to win the various wars because of the information that US had. And because of that, China has been able to beef up their information warfare, basically to listen to people to listen to countries, people, activities, companies of their general plan, and to see how they can anticipate what they will do next, and they will use the information to their advantage. So between the US and China, there has been that form of conflict when it comes to information gathering. And looking at what Mr. James said, James Rubin, China has been able to censor its citizens from listening to what will potentially favor the US. And they are trying to advance the information that will favor China. And they also do data harvesting. So the thing is that for China, there has been the allegation that TikTok gathers information and they send this information to China, and the Chinese government uses the information to their own advantage. And the CEO of TikTok was called by the US Congress to come and give testimony as to how TikTok operates and how they gather all this information. So I don't think the US is lying when they are saying that China is gathering one form of information or the other, and they are transferring to themselves and using to their own advantage. Finally, they also use influencers. We're in the world of social media, whereby information propagation, information sharing is always the key. Using influencers that people will listen to is what is in scope at the moment. So the Chinese government is also using one form of influencer or the other to see how they can penetrate maybe the big wall of security or big wall of domination of the US. So basically, the conflict is ongoing, and I don't think it will end anytime soon.
Well, one would be tempted to always want to ask the question, why is there always a rift or this cold feud between the US and China? Because, of course, Joe Biden during the UNGA Assembly, that is the UNGA 78 summit session, said that he's not willing to go toe-to-toe with China and is willing to explore all diplomatic channels to strengthen ties with China. So when we have issues like this, what is actually the bane of this rift between the US and China, and how can we facilitate a diplomatic common ground in addressing issues of media manipulation and media management?
Yeah. So let's start with the US. The First Amendment in the US guarantees freedom of expression and freedom from discrimination regarding news outlets and regarding news dissemination and people to have access to information. So even the government in the US cannot really put a plank on their citizens from disseminating the news. However, when it reaches a particular stage whereby there will be a damage to integrity or to image of somebody, then the person has a recourse to court to sue for defamation. Now, going to China, China is more of a communist society, as people say, and for China, uh, putting their citizens under control is their main goal. And they feel like when you have access to too much information, then you are already, let's say, you're already exposed to various information out there that can be against the interests of China. So China and US have different policies regarding the information sharing. While US has their national TV and other private TV stations and radio stations and media outlets sharing their news, China has one particular news agency that is for the government. And in fact, they call it the propaganda station or something like that. However, it doesn't stop American TV channels like CNN broadcasting in China. But when there is any interest against China, China can effectively block any form of information that CNN will generate to the Chinese citizens. So looking at the warfare, I don't think there is uh uh any there's this word, any adverse step that the US can take against China. I think it's more of diplomacy, but the diplomatic way is rather it needs more strategy because both countries have to come to a middle ground regarding their policies, and they need to see where they can actually interconnect and dialogue regarding data harvesting, regarding censorship. For example, China has blocked YouTube, or the YouTube cannot be shown in China, but the Chinese people use what they call the VPN, the virtual private network. Basically, it's an encryption software where you can use to generate information or gather information from a network to a device without any form of without any form of any plan
Geographical
towards it.
restriction. Mm.
Yeah, without any restriction. Thank you for that. So people can watch YouTube, and for Chinese people, it's not illegal to watch YouTube in China, but generally there's a restriction against YouTube. So I think we are going towards that area, but the war, if there's any, God forbid, there will not be any war, but if there's any going to be any war, it will be based on information gathering, based on the information you have on people, on the activities. And right now, social media is the channel through which this thing can happen. Your name, your data, information. That's why if anybody wants to work with the government, US federal government,
Okay.
they will need to do data security, data analysis, data cleansing
Okay.
before you can work for them, because there is any possibility that China can have access to you.
Okay. All right, Damola, thank you so much for educating us on the news.
Thank you so much for having me.